All right, so how do we make things round? Well, that's a great question, and it's not really, I mean, it's kind of relevant because you can still use it for a lot of things, but round web design is something from the early 2000s, and we're going to stay away from that as much as possible, which means hard corners or a very small amount of roundness on the corners. And so what I'm going to start working with is the input here. Let's say I want to have slightly rounded corners on this input. I'm going to use the border dash radius property. And if you only supply one value to this property, it affects all the corners. So I'm going to say 3 pixels. I'm going to save it and refresh. And now when we set the border radius, we also need to set the border to fix the fact that it's reverting to an older state. So let's set border 1 pixel solid sort of gray color. There we go. So there's our rounded corners, and you might not be able to see them that well, so I'm going to make them bigger. Let's go with 10 pixel border radius, and this is going to make them quite round. Now this reminds me of the search input field on Twitter. I'm not sure if it still looks like that, but it used to a long time ago, and Facebook as well. Things have straightened out quite a bit in web design, so I'm not sure if this is still the state of those things, but that's how to use border radius in a nutshell. Usually, if you're going to be making anything round, or the edges of something round, you're going to be applying it to all sides. Now, you don't need a border for the border radius to work. So I'm going to set this to transparent. And that's another thing. Transparent is a valid color. It's not a hex color or RGBA, so you're not putting it in any specific format. It's the word, it's a keyword. You're just going to type transparent. This will apply to setting the background color of something, setting the color of the text if you really want to, but that's up to you. I'm going to save this and refresh, and now you'll see there's no border, but when I click into it, we still have the border applied there, so I'm actually going to remove that. Focus, let's just remove that border altogether. Save it, refresh it, and there you go. You can see the border radius still affects this even without a border. So it's basically the element itself. It's kind of like an element radius, but I guess we call it a border radius. Now, I'm going to reset that border so that we can see what we're doing here. I'm going to supply it 2 arguments, 10 pixels and then 20 pixels. And what you'll see is it's kind of offset. So the top left becomes the 10 pixels, the top right becomes 20 pixels, the bottom right becomes 20 pixels, and the bottom left, and the bottom right is 10. And so think of it like counter or clockwise. So we're setting 10, 20, 10, 20. That's how that works. Now you can also supply 4 arguments. So on the second one, I'm going to say 2 pixels, and then the last one, it's going to be really big at 50 pixels so that we can really see which side it affects. So as you can see, this is 10, 20, 5, and I think 50. We set it to, 50. So it's a clockwise circle that you're going around when you're defining these. Now, something else that's going to confuse things, and we need to do it on a bigger element, so we're going to be doing it on the image here. Let's use the image. We're going to use the image there. So you can set each corner to have its own border radius property, and you can set 2 values if you're doing it that way. So the image right here, I need to go find out how we should target that. It's not an image, it's a class of article image right there. So I'm going to jump over to my style sheet and target the class article-image. It's going to work really well if I spell it correctly. What we're going to say is border top left radius. And again, it's CSS, so every word is separated by a dash. It's all lowercase. border top left radius, you could do border top right radius, border bottom left radius, etc. So I'm going to set first just one value in here so you guys can see what happens. As you can probably assume, it's just going to change that one border radius. But we're going to apply two values here. And what's going to happen is the first one is the top, or is it the top edge? Yeah. First one is the top edge, right about to the corner itself. And then the second value is the left edge. So as you can see, it kind of bends here and then it gets more gradual. And that's supplying two arguments to it. Now let's set it even bigger. Now you can see it really well. So if we were going from the center of the element to the corner, it would be about here. And so you can see on the left-hand side, it's starting, I think I set it to 20 pixels or 50 pixels. So it's doing a 50 pixel border radius, and it gets here and it's like, oh, let's switch to 100 now. And it gets more gradual as it goes. I can't think of any point this specific application would be relevant, especially in web design where things are getting more straight-edged and hard corners. But if you ever feel like using this, that's how to use two values in each border radius declaration. Now, one final thing, you can easily make something that has equal width and height a circle. So what I'm going to do is this article image right here, I'm going to set it to height 200 pixels and width 200 pixels, and then I'm going to set border radius 100%. Save it and refresh, and what happens is it becomes a full circle because each of these edges, I guess, begin to turn right towards the other point where it can then, create a radius to the next point, and it keeps going. So that's 100%. But you can also set it to a full pixel, 100 pixel, save it, refresh, and it's still going to be a circle. And that's because the width and height is 200, so we could actually split it down to 50 pixels, and that's 1/4, and it should, 100, because it's half the height and then half the width. And that's exactly what we're working with to get it from this point right here to the top point. That's 100 pixels up and 100 pixels right, so it's 100 pixels. So that's border radius. That's going to be fun. And using circles to make an element circular, that's when the border radius is most used, at least by me. I don't really make things rounded that much, but we'll get more into that later. In the next video, I think we should cover pseudo elements. So kind of like pseudo states, they're not real elements, but they're kind of real.